So I had decided that I wasn't actually going to go anywhere near this plea hearing of Stephen Stearns because it just made me so full of rage. There were so many things about it that made me so full of rage. And of course, the thing that made me want to jump through my screen and choke the guy was his statement at the end. I can't even begin to describe the amount of rage I felt over that. But something occurred to me, and that's a simple thing that I learnt many, many years ago, but I seem to have forgotten about this recently. And that is, nobody has any power over you unless you give it to them in the first place. And when I realised that, I realised that all of us sitting here and getting really, really angry over Stearns' statement, we're giving him power. Right now, he's probably feeling pretty pleased with himself. He's probably feeling pretty damn smug. While out in the public, people just rage about his statement. So today, I'm going to take the power away from him, and I'm going to put it back on us. And I'm going to do that by analysing this statement and showing precisely what sort of narcissistic, psychopathic, sociopathic loser this guy actually is. Now, before I jump in and do that, this is not my style, and I hate that I'm having to say this again, but this week, of my last 5 videos, probably one of them has been monetized, which is really, really crippling my channel. So I am just going to ask if anyone feels that they would like to support my channel with a super thanks or buy me a coffee. Right now, that's something that would be greatly appreciated, because I'm really struggling here in terms of keeping my channel afloat. Now, of course, this is only a temporary obstacle. Hopefully, in the near future, I will see my views increase on my videos, and with me not talking about Stephen Stearns so much anymore, hopefully I won't see so many videos being demonetized. Now, of course, the biggest way you can help me out, if you can't afford to help me out with super thanks or buy me a coffee, you can help me out by hitting like on this video and by leaving a comment on this video, because that helps me get these videos out into the algorithm. And when I get these videos out there into the algorithm, that brings in more views, brings in new subscribers, and that's what's going to help me to keep my channel going. Now, I know people keep saying, well, why don't you live stream? That's going to avoid all these problems, you'll bring in more viewers, yada, yada, yada. I get that. But because at the moment my setup is basically all evolving around the use of an iPad, that limits what I could do in a live stream. Because when it comes to StreamYard, which is pretty much the only worthwhile streaming app or streaming program, you can't share your screen from an iPad. I can have guests come in and share their screens, like you may have seen when I had Ping join me, but I can't share my screen from an iPad. So until I can actually manage to get the money together and buy myself a MacBook, then it's just not practical for me to do live streams when I want to share any videos, or if I want to share anything on my screen other than just the icon that I use when I do a live stream. So that's the reason why at this point in time I don't do live streams. I'm not confident with live streams, I will admit, and it certainly makes it so much harder when you can't actually share your screen at the same time because you don't have those additional props, those additional bits of media to help you with what you're trying to say. As you know, the majority of what I do relies on having additional media to add to my content, especially if I'm doing an analysis. I couldn't do that as a live stream using my iPad because I can't share my screen. So that's just an explanation of where I am at with that. I had been aiming, I had made it my goal to try and get myself a MacBook prior to Stearns' second trial, but we don't need to worry about that now. So there's no real deadline on it other than just me trying to save the money up to get one in the future, which I will be doing, but at this point in time, this is what you get. There was also a suggestion made that, well, why don't you do premieres then? I could do premieres, but that does not affect whether or not my videos are monetised or demonetised, because they treat a premiere the same way as they treat a regular video. Basically meaning that if they were going to demonetise it as a video, then they're going to demonetise it as a premiere also. I will be attempting to do weekly live streams at least, until the point in time when I can get myself sorted to actually do live streams where I'm sharing my screen. But they, of course, will have the same format as my live stream that I did a bit over a week ago, where basically it's pretty much all just me talking and nothing on the screen other than just my avatar. So I will try and aim to do them once a week for people. But aside from that, it's all going to be straight videos. Okay, so let's talk about Stefan's speech. I apologise in advance because I may use some inappropriate language. I may not be as professional as I should be. Because to be quite honest, this guy has done nothing to earn anybody's respect whatsoever. So I will try to keep it as professional as I can, but I can't control the snark when it comes to this guy. I can't control the not so nice statements when it comes to this guy. As you may have seen, I put a YouTube short out this morning that was basically designed to make me feel better, and it actually did, even if it was somewhat petty. So I have been avoiding this, and you can tell I'm still procrastinating. So it's probably time that we just jump in and let's really tear to shreds this speech of Stearns.
Thank you. Let's place Mr. Stearns under, he's been previously placed under oath.
Yes, Your Honor, I would like to make a brief statement.
First observation is that it is extremely rude of him to be sitting down while he makes this statement. It is disrespectful to the judge, it is disrespectful to Maddie, and it is also disrespectful to every single person who got up there and made a victim impact statement in that session, or to the prosecutors who read out victim impact statements. The only person that should remain sitting in the courtroom when they are talking is the judge. You'll also notice that they are at cross purposes there. Judge Carson was making sure that Stearns was still under oath, because obviously anything that is said in this hearing is admissible. But that to me says that he was expecting your standard statement that you would hear from someone who has just admitted guilty, and that is for them to express remorse for their actions, for them to apologise to the families of the victim, for them to apologise for the amount of suffering that they've caused for all the people connected to that individual. Yet for Stefan, that's not what the purpose was in his mind at all. He had no intention whatsoever of offering any kind of apology or of actually showing genuine remorse. And I am going to outright criticise Alicia Smith here, because clearly she had had a conversation with Stearns prior to this about him making a statement. Because she turned around and she asked him about that. But it seems pretty clear that his statement was not passed by the court beforehand. Maybe she looked at it and thought, hey, that's okay, I'll let him do that. Maybe secretly she hoped someone would jump the guy and save them all having to send him off to prison. But if she didn't check what his statement was going to be beforehand, then shame on her. Because it comes down to her and it comes down to the judge for allowing him to make this statement in court. I'd be very surprised, although I don't know what to think anymore. But if the judge saw this statement beforehand and approved, then shame on him. And likewise, shame on Alicia Smith. There is nothing about Alicia Smith that I find likeable. From the entire time that she has been on this case, the motions that she filed were so disrespectful and so disgusting. And if she has had knowledge of what Stearns was going to say and still went ahead with it, then shame on her. I will just say it highlighted the difference in the way Australians view authority and the way Americans view authority. Because I would imagine that if this was an Australian courtroom, an offender had started making a speech like that in an Australian courtroom, that someone really would have jumped that guy. And it would have been really hard for them to stop them. Because if one person jumped that guy, you'd probably have a few people going for him.
I agree that it's not fair that Madeline is not here anymore. I still have a hard time contemplating a world where she's not around, a world which feels less vibrant and less colorful than it did before.
Right, you can tell immediately that the intended audience here is the judge. And honestly, I'm disappointed that the judge didn't shut it down at this point in time. But you saw he was making that statement. You could see him shaking his head a little. He didn't really believe what he was saying, I swear. And then he looked up to see how his statement was landing with the judge, to read how the judge was taking it, basically to see what he needed to adjust in his statement. Now, everything that he is saying here is essentially giving the message loud and clear that he doesn't see it as his fault. I agree that it's not fair that Maddie is not here anymore. He's not saying that it's his fault that Maddie's not here anymore. He's saying that in his opinion, it's not fair. And when you are the person that is responsible for someone not being around anymore, you can't claim that it's not fair. Because fairness went out the window. Because that is exactly what he's saying right now. He believes it's not fair for him that Maddie's not around anymore. He doesn't give a damn about all those people who just gave their statements. He is talking about himself. He has taken the statements of the people who cared about Maddie, people who are hurting, people who are there because they want to make sure that he is locked away for good, and he's turned them and slapped them in their face with their own words. So disrespectful. And so wrong to claim it's not fair. Because fairness doesn't come into it when you are involved, Stefan Stearns. You caused it to happen. when you talk about something being not fair, you're essentially saying that it was beyond your control. It was well and truly within his control. So he has no right to claim that it was not fair. And this comment that he finds it hard contemplating a world where she's not around and that the world is less vibrant and less colourful. Let's be real here. He's feeling sorry for himself because he's locked up. Yes, it is less vibrant and less colourful because he gets very little time outside. And he's going to continue to get very little time outside because they are going to have to try and keep him locked up nice and tight for the rest of his life. Because you bet there's a target on his back. This is an extremely selfish comment, an extremely self-centered comment. And again, it is shitting all over the comments, the statements that were made by the people that truly cared about Maddie. Because he's basically laying claim here to Maddie. Saying, look, you know, you guys are hurting, but hey, look at me, I'm hurting too. My whole world is just dark and grey now because Maddie's not in it. And look, in some sicko way, yes, he does think that he cared for Maddie. But it's not a natural kind of care. He was addicted to Maddie. Not because of who she was, but because of what he was taking from her. So this is an entirely self-centered comment. This has less to do with Maddie not being around and more to do with him having lost his freedom and him having lost his activities connected with Maddie, and of course him having lost all his images and all his videos, which thankfully, since he's not going to trial, he will never ever get to see them again. The other thing that we need to acknowledge here is that for the past 15 months, pretty much the majority of his interpersonal relationships has been between him and his parents. And we've listened to those jail calls, we've read those emails, and for him it has been all about manipulation. And he's basically saying exactly the same things here that he has said with his parents to manipulate them. Everything he's saying here is still him denying responsibility for his actions. So even though he pled guilty for the first trial, what he's doing now is showing quite clearly that he does not accept responsibility for his actions. He blames the universe. None of it is his fault. But in terms of him having had pretty much the bulk of his interpersonal communications with his parents, it's like he has forgotten how to communicate with other people. And he goes directly to the emotional manipulation that he uses with his parents, not realising that he's having the opposite effect. Some people said they think that he did this deliberately to enrage people. But what I'm seeing here is two things. One is he has spent the last 15 months rehearsing this narrative. He has said these statements over and over again to his parents, and they have given him positive reinforcement for these statements. So he believes that they're going to work on the judge and that he can manipulate the judge with these statements. But the other thing that we're seeing here, now if you think back to when Maddie first went missing and there were those interviews that Jen and Stefan did, and Stefan had to keep butting in and giving answers, because for Stefan, he has this insane jealousy of anyone having more of Maddie than he does. And that's exactly what's going on here. He's sat there and he's listened to all these victim impact statements, and he is jealous of the relationship that they had with Maddie. So he wants to one-up them. He wants to show every single person that gave him a victim impact statement that actually he was number one when it came to Maddie. This is essentially a pissing competition for him. He's trying to tell them, Maddie meant more to me than she did to any of you. Maddie belonged to me more than she did to any of you. He's still staking his claim here. It has not entered his mind whatsoever that what he is doing is causing pain for the people in the courtroom that cared about Maddie. He doesn't care about them. He doesn't even think about them. All he is thinking about is making sure that they understand that he has more of a claim to Maddie than them. It's like that person, you go to work and you sprained your arm over the weekend and you make a comment on it because you're having trouble picking something up. And there's going to be that one person who's suffering more than you and they want to make you know. Well, I strained my arm 6 years ago and it's still not right. And I can't even pick up things that size. So consider yourself lucky. That's what Stephanie's doing here. Because he's such a narcissist that for him, hearing all these other people talk about Maddie annoys him because he believes that he has a greater claim.
I've prayed to God countless times to trade places with her, to take me instead.
Someone needs to explain to this guy how that works. Because, for starters, God has no claim over him whatsoever. God doesn't want him. God is not going to have him. He is going straight down. Especially if he is going to spend the rest of his life refusing to accept responsibility for his actions. There's no way known that this guy is going to be anywhere other than going down, because he is still refusing to admit what he did. No contest. He can't even do the right thing by Maddie there. So this BS about, I keep asking God to take me instead of her, it's hollow words. He knows it's hollow words, and I don't believe that he even believes in God. This is what he has been telling his parents because he knows that his mother has been heavily reliant on her faith ever since this happened. He's had that conversation with Chris, where Chris has now got some kind of Bible buddy that goes walking with him and they discuss the Bible and Christianity and stuff like that. So this has been part of his manipulation repertoire for the past 12 months or so with his parents. And he thinks that it's going to hit home in the courtroom. Even though most people are going to react in the same way that we do. With, well, first of all, dude, you are not going to heaven. And secondly, this is just a load of BS. If he truly thought that it was possible for some higher being to go, okay, well, I'll just come and take you and I'll put Maddie back on Earth, he wouldn't be saying that. He knows it's an impossibility. He doesn't believe it in the first place. And note, he's not saying that he wishes that it had been him who had died instead of Maddie, because that shows some sort of regret. That shows sadness over her being gone. No, what he is saying is something that is a complete impossibility, and he knows it is a complete impossibility, but for him, it is a good way of manipulating his audience. And of course, in his mind, by claiming to be Christian, then he's absolving himself. And he thinks that the people who are listening will listen to him and say, oh, okay, yeah, he must be a good person because he's a Christian. He must be a good person because he's talking to God about what he did. But it's not how people are going to hear it. It is such a blatant attempt at manipulation. It is so narcissistic. And it is not based in any sort of real religious belief. He's talking the talk because he's learnt to do that, to manipulate his parents. Like I said, he's a bit out of practice because the only people he's been able to manipulate in the last 15 months is his parents. He's not out in Gen Pop, so he can't manipulate other prisoners. Maybe he can talk to them through the walls and have their girlfriends send him gifts in return for him allowing them to use his code so they can spend his father's money on phone calls. But that's a different thing altogether. He is trying to convince people that he is virtuous, because in his mind, if he can convince people of that, then they might believe that he's actually got regret for what he did over Maddie. They might believe that he's a good person. But he never actually says anything about regret. He never apologises for what he did. These are hollow words.
And unfortunately, that's just not how he works.
Well, duh. Honestly, just him trying to, again, convey if it was in his power, he would make it happen. It's just a complete load of BS. And I think originally either Deb or Chris said that comment to him. If we go back through all the phone calls, I'm pretty certain we can find all these statements in those phone calls. All of them directed at manipulating his parents to get more commissary money, to make sure that they keep maintaining contact with him so he can milk them dry. This has got absolutely nothing to do with him feeling bad for what he did, with him feeling regret, with him wanting to change the situation. You can bet he would not swap his life for anybody's. He might claim that he would happily trade places with Maddie. Like I said, you never heard him say he wishes that he had been the one to die, not Maddie. He's talking about after the fact because he knows it's an impossibility. And this whole, oh, it doesn't work that way. This is a comment that's been given back at him by one of his parents. I'm pretty certain. It rings very strongly as probably a Chris statement, who were basically coming back at him over his manipulation. And that's all he is trying to do here. He is trying to manipulate his audience, and he is failing dismally. Now, I would have loved to have been a guard in that courtroom, whichever the guard was that had the button for his stun cuff, because I would have been hitting it about then. I'd be happy to lose my job if it meant seeing him get walloped with a stun cuff in the courtroom while he was giving that statement. And as for why the judge didn't stop him, why the prosecution didn't stand up and object, why his own lawyers didn't stop him. I think this goes back to what I said. Nobody had a preview of what he was going to say. Given that this is usually the time when someone is apologising for their actions, they were probably waiting for that punchline. They were probably waiting for him to turn around and acknowledge that he did the wrong thing. And when it got to the end and he didn't, they were probably just as pissed as we were. And the irony here is that his lawyers wanted there to be a stipulation when it came to sentencing time that basically all the people who were going to do victim impact statements had to submit them on paper beforehand to be approved by the defence. Well, it seems to me that it needs to be protocol in the courtroom now that if someone is entering a plea and they are going to make a statement, a plea statement, then they should also have to submit that statement beforehand or keep their mouths shut.
I have nothing but sorrow for her loss, and I miss her all the time.
He has nothing but sorrow for her loss. Not only is that him trying to make it sound like he cared so deeply about Maddie, but if he has nothing but sorrow for his loss, he's essentially saying he's got no regrets. He's not apologising for her loss. He's not accepting guilt. He's not saying, I feel guilty over her loss. I feel sorry that because of me she's no longer here. No. It's all about Stefan. He's making it clear. He's making it blatantly clear. He's got no regrets. He's not going to apologise. He's not going to accept guilt. He's not going to accept any form of responsibility. He's also not going to accept the fact that he's hurt other people, because none of those come under what he's just said. Disgustingly, he probably does miss her. Like I said, he misses her because of the control that he's lost. Because he had complete control over that child. I bet he doesn't miss Jen. He probably doesn't even miss his parents. But for him, it's about the gratification. He misses the gratification he had from being around Maddie. He's also clearly not reading the room. Because when you are responsible for the death of a 13-year-old child, and you've just listened to all these victim impact statements where they are talking about how their lives have been shattered by Maddie's loss, the true impact on them because they loved her with no strings attached. They didn't love her because of the gratification they got. They loved her because of her personality, because of who she was, and in some instances because of the familial bonds. But he's crapping all over that. Totally disregarding everything that everyone else has said. And he wants to make sure that people understand, again, that she was his. It is that one-upmanship, and it is him basically staking his claim. It is also an attempt to manipulate the audience, because he's trying to give the impression of regret when there is none. The whole thing with what he's saying here is actually all very narcissistic, very self-centered. But he's so accustomed to being able to manipulate people with his words that in his mind, these words are going to convince people that he's not a bad person, he didn't mean to do it. It's his way of pretending that he has regrets over his actions without having to actually admit that he has regrets over his actions. Everything that came out of his mouth during this speech was self-serving and manipulative. And it was intended to manipulate. And let's not forget, Stefan loves playing the victim. He thinks that by saying this, that people might feel sorry for him. We heard that ridiculous car trip where he was moaning about not having a proper pillow and being cold and everything like that. He cannot comprehend that when he has done such horrible, horrible acts, that people are not capable of feeling sympathy for him because he deserves no sympathy. So he is trying to force people to feel sympathy for him. He is trying to distract people from his actions by asking for sympathy. It's the kid who gets into trouble because they stole their dad's car and crashed it. And instead of accepting responsibility, they turn into a blubbering wreck and claim that they're so upset because whatever, they'll come up with some ridiculous thing. Their girlfriend dumped them, or they're so upset because it's really traumatised them being in that car accident, and they will do whatever they can to basically try and distract people from the actual reality of the situation. There's so many levels of manipulation here in Stefan's statement that it is just unreal.
Her passing has torn me and my family apart as well. And she truly was a joy.
Okay, let's be realistic here. The only thing that has torn him and his family apart is him being arrested and incarcerated. As cold and callous as this sounds, had Maddie died in some other way, had she been maybe involved in a car accident or something that did not involve Stefan Stearns in any way whatsoever, Deb and Chris would probably be like, yeah, that's a shame. Stefan would probably be, well, I'm sad, feel sorry for me, I need you to give me sympathy because I like to get sympathy out of every situation. And then he probably would have moved on. The thing that has shattered his family is his actions. Him being arrested. For his parents, it's the discovery that their son is a monster. But again, this is also an attempt at one-upmanship. It's shattered me and my family also. So, don't give too much attention to those people over there who are actually related to Maddie and who were actually showing emotion in the courtroom, because I need your sympathy too. Notice the very flat tone throughout all of this. This guy is not capable of feeling empathy. He doesn't even give two hoots about his own parents. All he cares about is making sure that they stay on his side so that they can put money in his commissary, so they can buy him his books, so they can buy him his fancy meals. And of course, amongst all these statements that he is making, aside from the fact that he is doing his best to make it clear that he accepts no responsibility whatsoever for what happened to Maddie, by making these claims about the devastating loss of Maddie, how it's truly affecting him, what he is expecting the audience here to believe also is that he's an innocent man who's being framed. It is another step of the manipulation. By telling his audience how deeply emotionally affected he is by Maddie's loss, he expects them to believe that he couldn't have possibly been the person responsible for Maddie not being alive because of all these feelings. Now, he does not once refer to anything in connection with the CSAM trial. All he's talking about here is Maddie not being alive, the thing that he pled no contest to, because he wants people to believe that he's not admitted guilt because he's not guilty. He wants people to not notice that he's not mentioning here that he feels regret over all those images, over all those videos, over all those times that he did things to Maddie. This is a classic narcissist move. Deflect. Let's deflect from the thing that I've admitted guilt over, because I don't want to actually apologise for that. I only admitted guilt over that to get out of the death penalty. But he's avoiding talking about the images and the videos because they are irrefutable. The evidence of what he did is irrefutable there. So instead, he's deflecting and trying to convince people that just forget about that. Let's look at the fact that Maddie is not alive, and let's look at the fact that I am so torn up by it that it couldn't possibly have been me who was responsible for it. And again, this stems from the manipulation of his parents. He's like a broken record. We've heard this from him over and over in those phone calls. Early on in the piece, Chris confronted him about the images and videos and basically said, well, they've got you bang to rights on that. And ever since then, for Stefan, it's all about trying to convince his parents that he couldn't possibly have been responsible for Maddie's death. The ridiculous story of, well, she was fine and I went for a little walk and I came back and she was cold. Wasn't me, I had nothing to do with it. And now he's trying to push this onto the public, the people who are listening. And as much as I hate to say it, but I strongly suspect that in the near future we are going to hear his best buddy, certain YouTube creator who shall not be named, pushing a narrative in favour of Stefan Stearns. A narrative that he's going to be pushing on her, if indeed it is the truth and not some humongous fabrication that she is in communication with Stearns. But 100%, this is deflection from the things that he can't deny. And this is an attempt to manipulate people into feeling sorry for him. Because in his mind, if he can make them feel sorry for him and make them believe that he is just so broken up over the loss of Maddie, then they might believe that he had nothing to do with it. They might forget that there is a mountain of evidence that shows that he was the one responsible. And of course the other side of all this too is that he realises that his parents are going to watch this. Doesn't appear that they were in the courtroom, but you can bet that they were watching it. So a lot of what he's saying here would have been a continuation of his attempt to manipulate his own parents. You can bet that he would not have admitted anything in this courtroom that he had denied with his parents. And we've heard continuously him denying with them that he had anything to do with Maddie not being alive. So that's what he has to do here. Not just to convince the public, not just to try and convince the judge, but to convince his own parents still, because he needs that commissary money. He needs those books. He needs those fancy meals. He doesn't want to be cut out of their will, because he realises that when they're gone, he's hoping that he gets at least half of their estate.
I pray to God that she is in heaven and that he's taking good care of her. And I hope she gets to join the choir because she had a beautiful voice.
Okay, for starters, that makes me really angry, just simply because he used that as part of his story. The whole watching Sister act because she had a beautiful voice and she loved to sing for me. And what is going on here? Two things. First of all, everything he has said in his statement reflects on things that have been said by people in their victim impact statements. But at the same time, it's things that he's also used to manipulate his parents. So he's dug into his repertoire and pulled things out of his repertoire that are an answer to things that have been said by people in their victim impact statements. So we had that lady, and I didn't quite catch what her connection was, who spoke about Maddie loving to sing and loving to perform. So he wants to make sure that they know that Maddie used to sing for him too. That's the whole point of what he's saying there. But the other thing in this part of the statement is he gives himself away really badly here. He says, I pray to God that she's in heaven and that he's taking care of her. This, to me, shows quite clearly that he doesn't actually believe in God. This is just him talking the talk. Because if he truly had found Christianity, if he truly believed in God, then he would be saying that he knows that Maddie's in heaven. Because unless he's trying to imply here that a 13-year-old girl is responsible for some sort of mortal sin, and therefore her soul might have been in balance and she may not have got into heaven, then the meaning of what he's saying here is that he doesn't actually believe in God, he doesn't believe in heaven. He's talking the talk. And of course, alongside that, if you believe that she's in heaven, then of course you're going to believe that God is looking after her. So what he is showing here is a blatant misunderstanding of Christianity, and making it pretty clear he's demonstrating that he actually does not believe in God. He does not believe in Christianity. He believes in Stephen Stearns. And you'll note that he thought this was a good thing that he was saying, because he looked up at the judge several times while he was making this statement. He thought he was being convincing. And again, the commenting on her singing, that was definitely him attempting a pissing competition once again. Pay attention to me. Maddie used to sing for me too. I was important to Maddie. That's what he's telling all these poor people who just gave their victim impact statements. And at the same time, in doing so, he is basically devaluing the worth of their connection to Maddie. It's like he's saying to them, you know, you're claiming this special connection, but you know what? It's not so special because I've got this same connection myself. We know that he used to play Jen and Maddie off against each other because that put him front and centre. That meant that he got Maddie's attention. He got to be Maddie's number one. And he's jealous of these people who are claiming a connection to Maddie because he still wants to be able to claim to be Maddie's number one. So this statement that he's making is basically crapping all over their feelings, crapping all over their memories, crapping all over their suffering, their trauma, and trying to tell them, you think you've got it bad? I've got it worse. While of course at the same time still trying to maintain that whole narrative of I cared for Maddie so much, so I couldn't possibly have been the person who was responsible for her not being alive. And this is one of the things that makes that no contest plea so hard to stomach. Because had he admitted guilt, then at least he is saying he is responsible for what happened to Maddie. Had he chosen not to admit guilt and gone to trial, then he would have had to have faced everything that he did. He would have had to have seen every single bit of evidence that they had against him. Not only that, his parents would have had to have faced every single bit of evidence that they had against him. And I will say, on that note, I have no doubt that Paula will be continuing to put in FOIA requests for whatever she can get. And I sure as heck will be putting in FOIA requests for whatever I can get. Because if this guy is not going to actually admit to what he did, then it's up to the rest of us to make sure that it comes to light. Obviously, as you know, there are things I won't discuss on my channel, things I won't show on my channel, but I will show as much as I can to demonstrate this man's guilt, since he won't admit it to himself or to the world.
I will miss her all the time. I will never not honor her memory.
Again, pure manipulation. Someone needs to point out to him that a no contest plea is not honouring her memory. The only way he can decently honour Maddie's memory now is to actually confess, to admit what he did, maybe ask for forgiveness, but who's going to give him forgiveness? The things he did are beyond forgiveness as far as I'm concerned. But if he truly meant it when he said, I will never not honour her memory, he would not be sitting there at that moment entering a no contest plea. He would not be sitting there at that moment making a speech which basically is denying that it is because of him that Maddie is not alive. Everything he did from the moment that Maddie took her last breath, has not honoured her memory. I would love to slap that into his brain, but I think it would be impossible. If he truly cared about anyone other than himself, then he would change that plea, that no contest plea, to a guilty plea. And he would actually admit to what he did. But I'm willing to bet, other than anything that we get through FOIA requests that's not already been released, we're not going to hear anything from Stefan with regards to what he actually did to Maddie. Because it seems that he is unwilling to ever accept responsibility. And let's be real, even if by some freak occurrence he came out and he changed his plea to guilty and he accepted responsibility and he actually told exactly what he had done to Maddie, nothing he could ever do from here on in is going to honour Maddie's memory. Because he basically crapped all over that when he took her life. People talking about honouring someone's memory is a way of showing how much they valued that person. Well, you can't claim to have valued a person that much when you are the person that is responsible for their death. So this is another hollow claim. An attempt to manipulate that is more of a slap in the face for everybody in the courtroom.
And I apologize for all the pain.
Now, when I saw this the first time, that was the point in time when I really wanted to reach through my phone and squash his teeny little pea-brained head. It made me so wild. I apologise for all the pain. Oh, what pain? For his pain? For the pain in his ankle when he fell over in the jail? The pain that he's caused his parents? He can't even specify what he's talking about here. It's not even close to being a genuine apology. There is nobody that he's apologising to here. He's just talking about the pain. Not the pain that the people who cared Maddie suffered. Not the pain that he put Maddie through. None of that. It's just the pain. So very non-specific. But not only that, he finishes. He leans back in his chair and he juts his chin up in the air. He might as well have tacked on a "so there" at the end, because what he was displaying was basically arrogance and disrespect. This whole statement comes across as, look at me, I'm a victim here. I'm hurting too. I loved Maddie more than all those other people. And him doing that, leaning back in his chair, jutting his chin up at the judge, says to me that in his mind, he blames the judge and the attorneys for him having to enter these pleas. He resents the fact that he hasn't been able to talk his way out of this. And the speech and his body language was basically a big up yours to everyone that put him in that position. And the final up yours was directed straight at the judge. I'm willing to bet that in his teeny weeny little pea brain, he blames it on the judge for allowing the phone evidence and the Google evidence. And I have to say, it would be really interesting to get hold of his communications after this hearing to see what he was saying. Because I'm willing to bet that he is extremely, extremely resentful because he believed he should have been free, and he's going to blame it all probably on the judge. He's probably going to flip on his own defence team and start talking about their inadequacies. He is going to pick fault at everything the judge did, everything his team did, everything the prosecution did. It's going to be their fault that he has to spend the rest of his life in prison. Because for him, that's far easier than actually accepting any guilt. And you can see he resents that he's been pushed to the point where he couldn't have his own way and he had to enter this plea. He doesn't like that at all, and he's not considering it to be his fault. Nothing in his speech indicated any remorse. He very definitely avoided talking about the CSAM stuff because they had him banged to rights on that. And he admitted guilt to that. But that's as far as he will ever go with that. He only admitted guilt to that because I'm willing to bet that the only way they were going to enter into a plea with him would be for an outright admission of guilt there, because they had him banged to rights anyway. But he chose not to address any of that because that puts him in a bad light. So instead, what he did a speech that was aimed at basically crapping all over everyone who made a victim impact speech, showing them that actually he was number one for Maddie. He's mourning Maddie more than they are because he was closer to Maddie. He's also using the speech to manipulate. See, look at me, I couldn't possibly have been the person responsible for Maddie not being alive because look how much I cared for Maddie. This whole speech was doubling down on the no contest plea, saying, I'm not guilty. I'm just going to plead no contest because these nasty, horrible people have pushed me and made me do it. And I'm going to bitch and moan about it for the rest of my life. And I bet he does. So when you break it down, this speech from Stephen Stearns really just shows how pathetic he is, how much of a liar he is, and how much he tries to manipulate people. It was an act of desperation. And when you look at it that way, it's easier to realise that he is just a pathetic maggot, to quote one of the people who did their speech. And that makes it much easier to take when you realise that all this speech is a demonstration of just how incredibly pathetic he truly is. And I think it's really appropriate here just to play a portion of Stephanie Soto's speech, because I think that highlights it more than anything I can say.
I asked the court for something that I know I could never really have, justice. Because real justice would mean that Maddie would be here with us and not you. You still get to wake up every day, something you cruelly stole from her and from us. The way you discarded Maddie as if she was nothing and her life had no value is a true reflection of your evil. The suffering you caused her should be given back to you tenfold. You do not deserve peace. You do not deserve mercy. You deserve to carry the weight of her pain every single day, just how we will carry it for the rest of our lives. And let me be perfectly clear. Where you go after this life will not be where Maddie is. She is in a place of peace surrounded by love. You, on the other hand, will never know peace. You will never see her again. You're not going where she is going. You're going to hell.
You know, I would happily pay for the cost of having a loudspeaker installed in his cell so that they could play that bit of audio to him every night before lights out. Because I think Stephanie nailed it. And I think we need to keep that in mind when we listen to his disgusting, vile words. Because she was spot on. He demonstrated how much of an evil, vile person he is. So those words in his speech are totally hollow. They have no meaning whatsoever. And there is that reassurance of knowing that even if at this point in time it doesn't feel like justice has been served, he is going to suffer. Not only is he going to suffer in this life, but he's going to suffer eternally, because he will never accept the consequences of his actions. And he will never, ever, ever have access to Maddie ever again, because he can never go where she's gone. Stephanie is correct. He's going to go straight to hell. Now, on that note, the cheery thought of Stephen going straight to hell, I think we all need a little bit of a break from Maddie's case, just to absorb all this, and I guess to heal a little bit. Because for many of us, we've been in this from the beginning. For so many of us, we have lived this case every day since Maddie went missing. And this is not the resolution we had hoped for. But I feel hopeful that there will be some justice headed Stearns' way. But in the meantime, I think we all need a bit of space, a bit of breathing time, just to come to terms with everything that's happened this week. So I will be coming back to Maddie's case. I will be doing a video talking about the making of the monster, discussing how Stefan's parents contributed towards the individual that he became. Because I know that at the moment there is a bit of a swing of people showing sympathy towards Deb Stearns and Chris Stearns. And they seem to have forgotten the role that these people played in creating the person that Stefan became. And I think it's important for us to be able to understand that as well. Now, a lot of Stefan's traits, I would say, are things that he was born with. And I will discuss that in that video. But parenting does play a huge role when you have a child who is born a narcissist, like he is. I will, of course, also be coming back and doing some major focuses on Jen Soto, because I think it is really important now to make sure the spotlight is on her and make sure that there is an arrest that occurs. Because as far as I'm concerned, until that woman is arrested, then there can never be full justice for Madeline Soto. So, on that note, thanks for listening. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe. And of course, please hit that like button and leave a comment below. YouTube likes that and it helps get my videos out into the algorithm. So thank you, and I'll catch you in the next one.
I begin to wonder